I need a love I can hold on to when I'm falling through the darkest night. I need a love I can belong to, no fear of being left behind. I need a love, I need a love, I need a love. I need a love I can believe in when my faith is blinded by the pain. I need a love I can breathe in, fill my lungs with your sweet name. I need a love, I need a love, I need a love. With you I found my way back to me. Oh, in your forever arms I see there is a place for the rescuing. I know. I need a love to give thanks in the heavens for you, my angel in disguise, for your endless love so freely given and the depth of your sacrifice. I need a love, I need a love, I need a love, I need a love. Where would I be without you? I need a love, angel in the sky. I need a love. Thank you for all you do.
We're there. Hi, thank you so much for having me today. I'm really happy to be here with you. Like Annie said, I am a clinical social worker at Duke Hospital, and I've been practicing social worker for about 28 years. The majority of my career has been working at Duke, working with patients and their care partners, helping them to navigate new diagnoses and life with a chronic illness. On a personal note, I have served as a care partner for my father-in-law when he had a stroke and he came to live with us. And I also had the privilege of serving as my mom's care partner throughout her journey with a chronic illness and through the end of her life. So I have some professional experience and personal experience, and I don't presume to know exactly what your situation is and how it's going for you, but I hope I can share some things I've learned along the way that might be helpful to you. We're going to talk about managing your evolving role and identity as a care partner. What is a care partner? It's an agreement between the person with a chronic condition and their loved one to be partners in care as best they can, to help each other with health, wellness, and caring for each other, to do so as long as you can, while you can. Often people wonder, why I've only heard caregiver. What is care partner? I don't understand that term. It's a term that I think is pretty unique to the Parkinson's community. I hadn't really heard it till I started working in the movement disorders clinic. But the difference is a caregiver gives care, while a care partner partners in care, which seems sort of like a minute detail, but it really is, can allow you to have a powerful shift in how you think about your role. If you're working alongside someone and walking alongside someone, helping in their care and partnering in their care versus doing things to them or for them. You know, healthy relationships evolve and give and take on both sides. So that's where the partnership comes in. Who are care partners? Very often when I see folks, I see many spouses or significant others who are caring for their significant other. A lot of children who are caring for a parent who has Parkinson's disease. And then I see all sorts of other care partners along the way that are sort of more alternative. Sometimes it's a sibling caring for their sibling, a friend, a niece or nephew or some other relative who's caring for another. Sometimes I see a former spouse. That's not as unusual as it might seem. You know, in this room right now, and for the folks that we have online, we're glad you're joining us as well today. You know, the group today is made up of different people at different places on this journey. Not everything you're going to hear today is going to apply exactly to your situation, but I hope you can take nuggets from what you do here and figure out how it can apply. What are some of the practical considerations when we think of role changes and the evolution of our role as a care partner? As I said, it's a continuum of care. For folks with Parkinson's, you know, it's a longer course diagnosis. So we have people here in the room who this is newer. Maybe your person was newly diagnosed. You're just sort of on the learning curve of learning about Parkinson's and what it is and what it means. There might be very minor changes at this point to their functioning and what's going on. That you're still going about life in very much the same way as you have all along. That's one end of the continuum. The other end of the continuum, we have folks who are much further along, and the person that they're helping and they're partnering with has more symptoms. I have to take my glasses off here. More symptoms and perhaps some more cognitive symptoms, some more mobility issues, and you might be sort of in the throes of providing care and doing much, much more. Then we have people who are sort of right in the middle. It's different for everyone, and your role changes over time as the needs of the person changes. There's also some different changes depending on the nature of the relationship. As you can imagine, when you're a spouse and you're caring for a spouse or someone who you live with, a significant other you live with, you know, we all have sort of a normal distribution of tasks in your household and how to make your household run. Somebody does finances, somebody does the yard work, somebody else does the laundry. Sometimes you draw who gets the short straw to do some of those things. Often, you know, we sort of divide tasks along our skill set and what we're good at, which works really well when everybody's functioning at the top of their game. However, as time goes and needs change and abilities change, sometimes that distribution needs to shift. And that can be stressful. If you've never been the money person, the person who deals with the details and the finances, to suddenly get that heaped on you when you know it's not your thing, that's a lot. That's a hard thing. So as it goes, you can end up taking on more roles, but not getting the other stuff to come off. You're just sort of adding, and that is shifting a role, and changes the balance there. Also, the changes in a significant other relationship, in your partner dynamic. I mean, there's also changes that happen over time with that. When at one point, and for the bulk of your relationship, you've been partners and you've been in love and you've been living as independent adults together, living a life together. And over time, as needs increase, it can sort of start to shift, and it can feel more like, instead of being husband and wife or whatever the dynamic is in your relationship, it can start to feel more like patient and caregiver or care partner. And it's a shift that happens, and learning how to navigate that, and what does that mean, and how do we protect that relationship. For a parent and a child, for a child who's taking care of a parent, you always see your parent as invincible. They're the one who's taking care of you most of the time and all your life. They're solid, stable. Most of us don't think much about our parents having needs. We're actually being, people. It's not until we get older that we sort of start to realize, oh, yeah, they really are people, and they really have needs, and they really have a life outside of us. But there's a shift there when you are starting to have to care for a partner, or for a parent. It's hard being a parent, and the vulnerability that's there, that they're having to let their child help them and care for them in ways that they didn't have to before. Children can get some resistance because of that change and shift, and that can be a hard dynamic to navigate at times. For those who are sort of alternative care partners, when I think of siblings or friends or cousins, I think of those relationships as having a more firm boundary. I mean, most of us aren't kind of digging into our brother or sister's finances or their personal medication situation. I mean, we just sort of live our lives independently, even if you're really close. Most people don't have access to all the intimate details of their life. But suddenly, when you find yourself in this role as a care partner, there's a point at which that starts to blur and it starts to change, and you're sort of having to deal with some of the awkwardness of now inserting yourself into some of more of their personal needs. And that's a shift for folks. What is helpful? What is helpful? I mean, no matter what the situation or the change or how it's happening, what is helpful for learning how to deal with it? Communication. It's huge. It seems simple and, silly to even have to verbalize, but it really is important to have a really good, healthy communication with a person who you're caring for. First and foremost, what does the person with Parkinson's want in a care partner? So often, I see early on, someone's diagnosed, and the care partner, they feel so helpless. They want to do something. They love their person. They just don't know what to do. So they kind of can jump in and attack, and not attack, but attack the role of being a care partner and want to do and help. And the person with Parkinson's time out. No, I want to kind of do this on my own and do this in my own way. And yeah, I know I'll need your help, but I don't need that much yet. That happens. So being able to communicate about what they want and what they need. Having that open and honest conversation about each of your feelings, your fears, your worries, your needs. Being able to talk about those things. It's important to talk about those things too before you really need them. Sometimes when you're in the throes of things, in the thick of it, you have these conversations that are sort of emotional in nature, but if you can early on, when things aren't necessarily an issue yet, talk about, hey, what are we going to do in terms of advanced care plannings? What kind of decisions would you want me to make for you if you couldn't make for yourself? What about if we get to a place and we can't live in this house anymore? Where would we want to live? What kind of a situation will we want to be in? Having some of those conversations when you're not even there yet is much easier, feels a little bit better. So something to think about. Make sure that you're really listening and asking questions. asking what's important to them and what they need and want, and listening to what they say. And be sure that you're expressing love and appreciation for each other. It is a partnership. And what do you love about them? And what are you grateful for in your relationship, even as it is evolving and changing? And remembering to express those things to each other. These things have to be continually assessed. Obviously, as things shift, needs change, so that you're continually assessing what's going on and what the needs are. It's really important to be adaptable. Things aren't always going to be the way that and function well the way they always did. And so being in a position where you can shift, where you can adapt, where you can roll with things makes things a lot easier for folks on this journey. And finally, having a tough skin and not taking things personally. You know, so often the person with Parkinson's themselves has stuff going on. They have feelings, they have emotions, they have, you know, their own journey and role shift that they're navigating. And sometimes they can respond short, or they can get frustrated with you, or they can snap at you. And just learning that, okay, it's not to take things so personally. You know, part of, and speaking about that and some of the things that are going on for the person with Parkinson's, I think it's important and helpful to think from their perspective of what is it that they need and what do they want. Because if we're coming at it from that perspective, sometimes it helps us to manage our tone and manage the way that we approach them for different things. Most of all, they want their independence. They want to be as independent as possible, as long as possible. That's everybody's need. No one likes to rely on other people. No one likes to ask people for help. It's hard. But really allowing them the independence for as long as you can. Dignity. They're really hoping and want to be worthy of honor and respect. You know, remembering who they were before Parkinson's, and what attributes and amazing qualities do they bring to the relationship, regardless of the Parkinson's going on, and really respecting them for those things that they bring to the relationship. Self-determination, people ask what that is. It's the process by which a person controls their own life. Don't we all really want to control our own life? That's our basic nature. We want to live life on our terms, how we want. Though I'll say that for a care partner, sometimes it's hard when they're wanting to live their life in a way that you may not agree with, or you may wish was different, or you may wish they did things differently, or they they don't listen to us all the time, you know, and they should, we think. But the reality is they're an adult, and they can make their own decisions, and they can make their own choices, and you can prompt, and you can suggest, and you can gently nudge, but the reality is they get to make the choices and do what they want to do. So some of being a care partner is learning how to accept that, and how to respect that, and how to nurture that. They want to be able to contribute to the partnership. Like I said, so often, you know, care partners can swoop in and start doing it all. Because of it can feel really helpless to be a care partner, and so you want to do. It's important not to smother or mother. You know, that giving people space, what can they contribute? What can they still do? You know, what can they do? If maybe they can't vacuum the whole house the way that they used to if that was a role. But you know what? When you're doing the laundry, can you throw it in, and then when they're watching TV, bring them the basket so they can fold it, so they feel like they're contributing? They might have been the cooker in the family and made dinners, elaborate dinners. You know, that may not be able to happen anymore because of balance and being able to stand at the stove and things like that. But can they sit at the bar of your counter, read the recipe to you, and measure things? Can they participate in some way that they're still an active part? That's really important, that they feel like they're contributing. They want to be heard. That goes without saying. They also want a nurturing of the primary relationship. So, like I said, and when we start to go into that partner-patient role, how do you sort of avoid that and be really intentional about, maintaining the marriage relationship? Are you going on dates? Do you have times that you go out and activities that you do or conversations that you have that you're not allowed to talk about Parkinson's? Not at all, in any way. We're gonna just go, listen to music in the park. We're gonna go go out to dinner or go get some tea somewhere, get some ice cream. We're just gonna make an active focus on getting time each week that's just us and thinking about our marriage. Same thing with the parent-child or with the sibling. If you're an alternative care partner, that you're not just going over to mom's house to take her to a doctor's appointment or to, do her laundry, but are you picking her up and, taking her out to the park or taking her for a walk or whatever the case may be, that you're getting some meaningful time together. I want to talk about grief and how grief plays a role in this whole dynamic. I had a hard time finding a really good definition of grief. Grief is a normal response to loss during or after a disaster or traumatic event. Grief can happen in response to loss of life, as well as to drastic changes to daily routines and ways of life that usually bring us comfort and a feeling of stability. We often think of grief relating only to death, but really, we grieve all loss and all significant change in our life. And certainly, a Parkinson's diagnosis comes with many losses along the way. Grief is normal, and it's a normal part of this process. What are some of the losses that a care partner may experience? Perhaps a loss of security, a loss of dreams or plans for your future. Hey, this isn't how retirement was supposed to go. Feelings of that. A loss of the relationship as you knew it. We spoke about that a little bit already. A loss of your own identity outside of the care partner role. I have people all the time saying, I feel like Parkinson's is taking over our life. Certainly for a care partner, it can feel that way. Your loss of relationships with other people. It can start to get isolating and lonely because other people don't always understand what's going on and understand what goes into getting time together with the friends and things like that. So sometimes it changes other relationships. And a loss of time for yourself. Certainly, there isn't much of that to go around. While we're talking about emotions, let's talk about some of the other normal emotional responses that care partners face. We talked about grief. With that comes sadness at times over those losses. Depression. I read a statistic in a Parkinson's Foundation care partner article just the other day that says 20 to 60% of care partners experience depression. Depression can be depression, anxiety can be situational and due to the situation you're in, or sometimes people have a long-standing history of some anxiety or depression that they've dealt with for the long haul. So then you get in this circumstance, in a more stressful circumstance, and it compounds those feelings. Anger. We can be angry at, why is this happening? Why is this happening to us? That it's happening at all. There's a normal amount of frustration that comes from dealing with your person with Parkinson's. They can be stubborn. Like I said, they don't always follow our genius, brilliant advice or see it as such. So you can be frustrated with them at times. I think also there's times you can feel frustrated with yourself, that maybe you didn't handle things the way you wish you had. Maybe you weren't quite as patient as you wish you were. Is your fuse a little bit shorter? Fatigue. Obviously, there's a lot of fatigue and exhaustion that could come with being a care partner, emotionally and physically. Loneliness. It can feel really lonely at times because you can feel like people don't really understand what you're going through. So how do you manage these things? How do you manage this change in emotion? Self-care is very important. You wouldn't let this happen to your phone, don't let it happen to you either. Self-care is a priority, not a luxury. That's huge. We've all been on the airplane when the stewardess or the flight attendant brings out the admonition. Okay, when those oxygen masks drop, you need to first what? Put it on yourself, and then you can turn around and help the other person. It's not going to do anyone any good if you are floundering around trying to help them, but you pass out in the meantime, then you can't get the person off the plane, right? Right. So in the same way, taking care of yourself in this is crucial. Why doesn't it happen? What are the two biggest things I hear from care partners who are sitting in my office looking at me like I'm crazy, like self-care, like I don't have time for that. Why doesn't it happen? Number one, because I think that there's a fair amount of guilt that comes with being a care partner. You feel guilty taking time for yourself. You feel guilty feeling sad or bad or feeling any of the emotions we talked about because, I'm not the person with Parkinson's. They're the one who has it really hard, and you don't allow yourself or feel like it's okay. Well, that's a normal feeling. It is indeed normal. But just because it's normal doesn't mean it's right. It can also feel selfish. It can feel like, selfish taking time for yourself and all this. But it's not. Again, you have to do that and take care of yourself in order to be the best care partner you can be. Having balance is key. I like to think of this scale and the importance of maintaining balance in our life. Think of the one side as the challenges and the demands that you're facing, and the other side as the supports that increase your capacity. What are the things that help you to cope with all you have going on? Again, earlier on, there aren't as many demands, there aren't as many challenges. It's a lot of just normal life that you got going on. And you have plenty of time and energy and capacity and support and people. But over time, as things change and the role shifts, it starts to go like this. And I should go like this. The demands get more and more, and the supports are less and less. And you have to be very intentional about adding to the supports. And what does that look like? Where are the areas that we most need to really focus? I'll start with, for care partners, your emotional health. We talked a little bit about the normal emotional responses and challenges that come. It's important to take time for yourself where you can really think about what does this mean for me and how is this going for me, that you can acknowledge the emotional impact that this is having on you. I strongly encourage folks to consider engaging with a mental health professional. I am a mental health professional, so there's a little disclaimer. I think they're fabulous, and I think that they can do a lot of great work to help you to build the skills, build the tools you need, and the resilience you're going to need for the long haul. What can they do for you? People, I think there's still a pretty significant stigma around engaging a mental health provider. Well, I'm not crazy. I can handle this. I got this. Well, you know what? My guess is most of you in the room played some sort of a significant role in getting your person with Parkinson's to get themselves to a specialist. That they were seeing stuff, or you were seeing stuff along the way, and they weren't getting diagnosed, and somewhere you kind of encouraged them to, okay, you need to see a neurologist or a movement disorder specialist, and that's where they ultimately got their diagnosis, and that's where they're getting treated. Well, same for you. It's important when you're dealing with this increase in emotional stress. Are you making sure that you're getting yourself to the specialist, to the person who can really help you build the tools you need? Again, they can help you process the losses involved, navigate the transitions you're going to experience along the way, facilitate communication with your person you're caring for. Again, learn new coping skills and tools. We have the tools in our tool basket that we've used kind of all our life. Well, we're in a new situation. When you're in a new situation, it requires new tools. You're going to reach in the bag and your hammer isn't always going to work for the project you're working on. Or that certain, wrench isn't going to work. You need a socket wrench. You're digging and you're pulling out, you're coming up short. And I think that having a mental health professional who can teach you some new coping skills and how to handle some of these new things you're facing. It also is considered, to me, a very sacred space. Everybody needs to feel like they have an objective person, someone who's not their family or a friend, that they can just go and the person's not going to judge them. They're not thinking anything. Friends and family, we worry they're going to be judging us a little, And I think having a professional who, this is what they get paid for. What you're saying isn't new and different for them. They've heard this. They've helped people. So you can say what's really going on and really express yourself and learn some new things. That also, another added benefit is it protects the relationships you do have. So often as things are increasing and the stress is increasing, our normal tool is to go to our friends and family and to talk to them about how you're feeling or how things are going or what's going on. Well, the challenge is for care partners in this situation, your family and friends don't really get it. I mean, most of the time they have a sense of what's going on or what you might be experiencing, but people don't know what they don't know. And unless they've really gone through it, they're not going to totally understand. And so having, people who do really understand and can help with that, but also preserving the relationship. So when you spend time with your girlfriends, you can just be a girlfriend and be the friend that you've always been, and you can have fun and you can laugh and you don't have to always talk about what's going on here. Same with family. It helps protect some of those relationships and maintain your identity within those roles. Physical health. I'm going to fly through this a little because I'm getting a little light on time. Staying on top of your own medical appointments. It's very easy to neglect your own care during this time. Maintaining or starting an exercise routine. This is really important. It's good for your health. I know we hear it's really important to exercise, but it really is important, especially when you're caring for somebody who has balance issues and mobility issues. Because if you're the person who's supporting them, you better be as strong as you can be. It's not a good thing when, we've had care partners who've gotten hurt, trying to help their person. And so doing the best you can to keep yourself strong. Also giving yourself sort of that space. It allows for a change of scene, some mental alone time, helps with mood and sleep. That's important. You get bonus points if you can create an exercise routine that involves a friend. So joining a Zumba class with one of your friends or going for a walk every day with a friend. And again, not using it as a time to talk about the challenges in your role, but just using it as time to be with your friend. Prioritizing good sleep is important. When we don't have good sleep and we're tired and exhausted, our capacity and ability to tolerate things is vastly diminished. So our patience level goes down, the ability to tolerate when someone snaps at us in a nice, polite way, down if we're exhausted. So the more you can protect your sleep. Healthy eating is also important. It's very important to create and bolster a support network. The interdisciplinary care team at your movement disorder center, use them. You've got the social worker, the PT, the OT, often a speech therapist. We often think of using these people when things are happening, when there's been a fall, when someone's having speech issues, when, there's an emotional crisis. But what people don't understand or realize is they can help you to be proactive. They can help you to learn how to have some skills to help before things become an issue. So I'd encourage you to involve them early. They also can be the bad cop. Let them be the bad guy for some of this stuff. So as you work with them, and they see what's going on and they can make recommendations that help. So it isn't you feeling like you're always nagging about something. It gives them a chance to help and to hear from a professional. Join a support group. That's something that can be really helpful for folks. I've already talked a little bit about family. There's a role for everybody, but not every role is for every person. Sometimes it makes a difference if you can figure out what are the things that only you can do, and then delegate the other things. Delegate it to friends or family or whoever. Maybe you hire someone if that's a possibility for you. Along the line with family, I want to talk for a quick second about adult children. When I think about the role shift that happens, we talked a little bit about that for a child whose parents having more needs and who maybe they're caring for a parent. There's also a shift that happens for parents, because parents are used to being the ones who are taking care of everything. And our role is to protect our children. That's what we do. And how do we make life easier for them? How do we help them? Well, as someone I have adult children, I've also been an adult child of a parent with an illness. And one of the big mistakes that happens, I end up with people in my office weekly that the care partner is just at wit's end. And they're with the person with Parkinson's, and together they're just demoralized because it's too much. And very often when we've done some talking and learning and asking how things are going and what they're doing, so often they have adult children. But, we don't want to bother them. They got their own life. They have their own stuff going on. Is that true? Absolutely it's true. When we were younger with young kids and working our lives, we had a lot going on too. But they still need to know how things are going. They need to know as things are evolving and changing so that they can be a part of the solution. So, I think people who do this best and who manage well are the people who really can approach this, as a family. Is every kid going to jump in and be able to help the way you want them to help? And are they going to do it the way you do it? No, I can tell you that. No, they're not going to do it exactly how you do it. But again, what can they do to help? Giving them an opportunity. Is it hard at times? Yes, but it's a very priceless gift you can give your children to let them be a part of helping you along this journey. Okay, friends, similarly, utilizing your friends. Also considering hired in-home care providers. And when is the time to do that and what can you have them do? Nurturing your own interests. This is huge. You need to have a life outside of Parkinson's and outside of the care partner role. You need to have hobbies that you enjoy and things that you enjoy and like to do, and making time and space for what is important. What makes you you? Besides being a care partner, what makes you you? These are the things that help you maintain your own identity and that give you grounding that you can go to when you're feeling stressed or frazzled. So continuing to bolster those things. Usually those are the things we throw out the door when we are running short on time. And this is not the time you need to, even if you have to do it differently, how do you still do it? Again, getting time alone and time with your own supportive people. The practice of self-compassion. What is self-compassion? It's treating yourself with the same compassion that you have for other people. This is really important and really hard to do. Very often, as we talked about, care partners feel guilt and are really hard on themselves along the way and wishing they could have handled things better or differently. I would encourage you to consider your best friend. And if your best friend was was going through this and was serving as a care partner for their person. My guess is you'd probably be the one who's encouraging them to take time for themselves, take care of themselves, and really not being so hard on themselves and prioritizing their needs. We need to treat ourselves in the same way. And focus and find the positive of what's going on in the circumstance and focus on that. Yep, there's grief involved, there's loss, there's changes along the way as we go through this role, but there's also a lot of good things that are going on at the same time. You're having an opportunity to see strengths in yourself that you hadn't seen before. Maybe you've handled something better than you thought you ever could. Creating some really great memories with the person that you care for, and just other things going on in life. You probably had some grandbabies who were born during this time, or you've seen some beautiful sunsets, or you've taken some vacations. It's easy to get bogged down and to focus on what's hard and things that are challenging, but really training yourself. There are many joys and many happy things along this journey too, and training yourself to see those things. You can't choose, you didn't choose this role, most of you. You can't choose Parkinson's, you can't choose how it progresses, you can't choose the symptoms that they're gonna have, and you can't choose, there's a lot you can't choose in this. The one thing you can choose is how you're going to handle it, how you're gonna cope with it, how you're gonna manage, and what you're gonna focus on. I love this quote. Don't wait for things to get easier. Oh no, simpler, better. Life will always be complicated. Learn to be happy right now. Otherwise, you'll run out of time. And finally, in the wise words of Winnie the Pooh, you're braver than you believe, stronger than you seem, and smarter than you think. Thank you so much for your attention. I know I went a little long, and thank you for all you do.
I'm Julia G. I am the care partner for my husband, Phil. If Phil will, is it on?
No, just hold it closer to your
Okay. If you'll raise your hand and kind of wave there. Phil was diagnosed in 2015, and all I can do is reiterate practically everything Ann said. That diagnosis, we went home in shock and denial, and stayed that way for way, way too long, I believe. So now we're coming to terms with it. It's a slow process, as all of you know. We are being very active to talk about it and maybe help others that are in our situation to realize this is not a death sentence, not at all. We can manage it, and we're out here. We flew from South Carolina here. We go to Charlotte. We're in Charleston. We do a lot to get out in the public and tell people about Parkinson's, about being a care partner, about the things you can manage, and know that your life is always going to be changing. We tend to forget that, but Parkinson's forces you into that realization. You're gonna change, things are gonna change. What's normal this week will not be normal next week. I also, I am the co-chairperson for our support group in Bluffton, South Carolina. I was voluntold to do that by my husband. Voluntold, yes, you may use that word, that is my creation. I really have to thank him for that, because it has forced me to educate myself, which I suggest for each and every one of us, whether you have Parkinson's or not. Educate yourself about it, and that's what I try to do every day. Educate yourself by talking to these vendors here, talking to your neuropsychologist, talking to your movement disorder person, talking to other folks that are in your position. And listen, because as you talk, it's a two-part thing. You say what you have to say, but you listen to what other people say to you. And I'm learning now. Okay, is that enough?
That's great. That's perfect. So let me ask you, Julia, can you please speak to the grief and loss that you have experienced within the context of your care partner role?
Grief and loss within the context of a care partner role. The most important grief, and I guess you can lump it into loss too, is to realize that this very self-confident man that I have known for 58 years, please tell me how I did that because I'm only 39. But this man that I was so attracted to when we first met, who even at 6 years old, he was very confident, you know, almost to the point of cocky. And it appealed to me. So now, am I okay?
You're good.
So now I am witnessing a person who questions himself, is not quite as confident about things as he used to be. And that, I don't know, I can't explain it. It crumbles me because I was like, oh my gosh, he is still the man I married. He is. He's still that confident person. And I find myself trying to pull out of me a way to encourage him to get him back to that point. And early on, that's very difficult to do. Very, very difficult. Some of the other things that I've experienced loss and grief about, we're retired, and spoke about this. We had all these plans. This is what we're gonna do. This is how we're gonna do it. This is who we're gonna do it with. And this is when we're gonna do it. Nah, psych, no, not gonna happen. All these things have changed. And you can either be flexible and change with those things, or you break. And I'm not gonna break. I'm not gonna allow him to break. And whatever way that I can change the way I'm thinking or not, what I've asked myself is, how can you grieve something that has not happened? My future hadn't happened yet. It's just what I want it to happen. And okay, it will happen, but just not the way that I thought it was gonna happen. So there you have it. The other thing that Ann made me think about, loss of this image that our grown children, we have 2 daughters, our grown children have of us. We're invincible, you know. One thing that's very, very precious to me is to know that I don't care how old our daughters get, when they're sick or when they're troubled, they always say, Mom, if I can just come home and lay my head in your lap, I'm so much better. Daddy, you know, because they're daddy's girls. Daddy, if I can just come home and have you talk to me. You know, give me that lecture that used to infuriate me. Well, Daddy doesn't do that anymore because Daddy just looks at you and says, you know, he's processing, he's thinking it through. And it's more of a, and we need to communicate more about this. Thank you, I bet you can see me now. But it's like, what do I tell you? Am I confident in myself? And I'm speaking of him, I'm speaking about Phil. Am I confident about the advice I'm giving you enough to even give it to you anymore? So yes, that's a real loss. Lastly for me talking right now, but lastly it is a loss of my identity. I was a very independent person. When I got tired of being in one place, guess what? I bounced. I was out. Well, I don't do that now, mainly because I'm getting older and I don't feel like it. But, you know, but the other thing is, I'm not comfortable just bouncing and leaving Phil. And I just can't do that. You know, maybe when it gets to a point where my cup is overrunning, I might say, bye babe, I'm gone for a while. But that enjoyment that I would have when I wasn't, well, before he was diagnosed, it's not there. So I may be physically away, let me put it that way, but mentally, emotionally, spiritually, I'm right there, still wondering, going, is he okay? Is somebody checking on him? Do I need to call him and check on him? He's a grown man. These are grown folks. And you don't want to be the helicopter person. Yes, I was a helicopter mother. Yes, I'm a helicopter spouse. But I try so hard not to be. It's not healthy.
Do we have time for another question, or are we doing patching? In what ways have you been intentional about caring for yourself?
Care partners, listen up, please. I used to have really, really long hair that would take me 2.5, 3 hours in a beauty shop. Religiously, I did that. I didn't cut my hair because of Parkinson's, trust me. I cut my hair because South Carolina is crucial, it's just hot. Okay. So what used to be 3 hours now is probably 10 minutes. And I do it myself, it's no fun. So that was the one thing that I thoroughly enjoyed. What I do now is, our doctor's office has what they call a salt room. It's Himalayan pink salt. You go in, they itemize it, it's all over the room. You breathe it in, it's great for your respiratory system, it's great for inflammation, it's great for your skin. 45 minutes, you're listening to meditative music. You think, you purge, you're by yourself. I do that. I kickbox at Kickboxing Field. As Ann said, you have got to be strong, because if you look at me, yes, I am 5 feet. Don't you dare say 5'11". I'm 5 feet tall. He's 6'2", and I have to be able to be confident that I can get him off the floor if he goes down. So we're in Rocksteady Kickboxing. I do a rowing class. That's all me, my own steam. You know, they set goals in these rowing classes. I suggested for any and everybody in here. It's called Row House. Go in, get trained, and just do it. And you'll just love it. I read my Bible, or I read my Bible. Do that. I read historical romances. I read mysteries. I read self-help books until they frustrate me, and then I throw them behind me. I journal. Oh my gosh! If you don't listen to anything else I say, please listen to this. Get yourself a journal. When you cannot take anything else, when everything is just pouring out of you and you're so frustrated that you really want to put your head through a wall, get your journal, write all that stuff down, put it down, an hour or two later, go back, read it. You know, if you want to keep it, keep it. If you don't, burn it. But at least it's out. You need a release. I'm very cautious about talking to people, just talking, because thank you, I'm learning so much. The relationship, you strain your relationships, I'm getting paranoid. You strain your relationships when you go to friends and you tell them about what's going on with you. You actually, I've done this once or twice. I've called the helpline and I've talked to a stranger. And I said, look, this is what's going on. Am I crazy? Well, I don't know. Are you? But you know, you need an outlet that's not going to stress the people that you care about. It's not going to change the dynamics of that person or that relationship you're in. And so I do that. I recently started to take a medication, and I wish I could remember the name of it. It's an antidepressant, and
McCusker. That's anxiety.
yes, it's not Valium because I still take it, but I am not a stand-up comedian. I'd like to be, but you know, I wasn't going to take it. I said, I don't need this. I can handle this. You know, this is a failure to me. Well, guess what? I take it, and I'm calmer. I think my anxiety and my feeling of helplessness and being overwhelmed, it's decreased so much more. So that's just a few of the things that I do. You know what I mean? Am I done?
That's perfect.
So.
And watching the dignity with which he has handled himself with this daily loss has increased my respect level for him just exponentially.
It's so beautiful and so special. And thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
on the other side of that coin, what has been challenging for you in this role of evolving with David?
You know, there's a number of things, but I guess I'll start with right as COVID began, soon after we all went into lockdown, David, due to Parkinson's and balance issues that were starting to show up for him very quickly, all of a sudden, took a difficult, painful fall in the middle of the night. And he cracked a vertebrae in his back. And it took 6 weeks due to COVID, medical issues, all kinds of things. But it took 6 weeks before he could have a surgery to help with that. During that 6 weeks, he was just writhing in pain. I just don't even quite have the words. And so a challenge at that point was, we don't live in the same house together. It's COVID. He is in horrible pain. He could hardly eat. He could hardly sleep. And I'm trying to maintain also a life for myself over here. It was hands down the most challenging 6 to 8 weeks to date that has happened in regard to trying to help David. So those challenges have continued in a variety of ways, but they ebb and they flow. But it's usually around each time I see him go through something new in regard to the way Parkinson's is diminishing his way of being in the world, whether it's strength, whether it's speech, whether it's he wants to isolate more, he's not comfortable with how people are viewing him. There's all kinds of things, mood. I could just go on and on and on and on. It just depends on the week. And so the challenge continues to be for me, how much do I step in and offer help and support? And how much do I step back? Number one, because we obviously no longer live in the same house together. Number two, this is a person with great pride. And number three, I don't think he's being realistic when he says, oh, I can handle this myself, or I can do this, or I can do that. But I'm always challenged to think, do I respect that and stand back? Or do I step forward and say, I hear what you're saying, but I'm going to step forward and help anyway? I'd say that's a constant tug of war in my head.
And that's almost like you're experiencing this duality of, should I help or should I not? And
Yes.
I can't imagine
Yes.
that conflict of,
Yes.
hoping to instill that independence and freedom and inspiration
Yes.
in your loved one, but also making them feel supported at the same time.
Yes, that's well said. Mhm.
What have you learned about interacting in a way that promotes independence and perhaps for you some autonomy, and for David?
And for David, yeah, great question. You know, a number of years ago, I taught elementary school for a few years, and I can easily move back into my fourth grade teacher way of being in the world, of the way I speak, and you need to do this, and let's get this together. I mean, I almost could take a whiteboard and make a list, right? Today, we're going to handle these 4 issues, and here's this, and here's that. It just comes out of me. I can't help it. And what I have learned is, and this has taken me some time to figure this out, is that by me moving into that, what I'll call elementary school teacher mode of, I know what needs to be done, let me schedule it, let's get it done, let's get it ready. I am participating in his loss of independence and possibly a loss of some dignity for him. And that was like someone poured a bucket of Gatorade over my head when I realized that, Krista. I just had to tell myself, snap out of that teacher. You're not here. This isn't competent adult talking to incompetent adult. These are 2 competent adults who need to work together to figure this out. And the other piece that I would say that has come with that is to remind myself, this is his body and his journey. He's going to make choices. And I can help gather the information for him about what's available, but it really is his journey through the world to make the choices. And that is hard for me because in my mind, it's like, this is what we need to do. Go here, do this, do that. So it's been important that I remind myself of that. So I stay in a certain tone of voice and way of being when I'm talking to David.
That's really good advice for anyone who's listening to us share your story today. Do you have any other words of wisdom or last thoughts that you would like to share with our community today?
I would say that I'm disappointed I can't be there because I'm not feeling well, because one of the things I most was looking forward to was connecting and talking with other people who are experiencing this. And I suppose the words of wisdom, at least from my point of view, is I don't want to walk this path alone. This is a scary path for me, observing someone that I care for going through this. And I don't have a medical background. I sometimes don't even know the right questions to ask. So I'm just so grateful for this conference and for the ability through Parkinson's Foundation to connect with other people who are in a care partner role and see what I can learn from them. Because I think harder times are coming for him.
Yeah, we can't all do it alone, right?
Exactly.
Well, Linda, thank you so much for sharing your time with us and sharing your story, and part of which is also David. So thank you.
Thank you all very much for being here. It is a real pleasure to be able to come out and do one of these talks in person. I've really been missing that in the COVID era, doing everything by Zoom. So this is really nice to actually be able to look at people's faces and really feel like I'm interacting rather than just staring into a computer camera and screen and looking at myself mostly. You all look much better than I do. So my talk is on identifying and addressing the thinking changes, the cognitive changes that come up in Parkinson's disease. I don't have any relevant disclosures to this talk, I think one of the things that is kind of pulled into the issue of cognitive changes in Parkinson's and dementia is this fear of not wanting to acknowledge it, you know, kind of that idea of, you know, say the name of the devil and he'll appear at your door, right? Like, so it can be that way with dementia. Nobody wants to say that, and that's very understandable. We don't want to see these changes in our loved ones, but they can come up. And ignoring them isn't going to make them go away, and ignoring them isn't going to make life any easier for anyone. So what I was hoping to accomplish here today is to just kind of take an eyes wide open look at what these changes look like, what can happen, and how frequently do we see them. I also want to talk about the evaluation process. This is really kind of where I come in my clinical role of evaluating whether what someone is experiencing in their day-to-day life is reflecting cognitive changes associated with Parkinson's, and kind of go through the why, what, when, and with whom process of that evaluation. And then I also want to make sure I spend some time talking about what do you do with this information. So you get a diagnosis, how is that helpful? And I think that's important because if that can't be helpful, then, you know, what are we doing seeking an evaluation in the first place? So from the person with Parkinson's perspective, the patient's perspective, what we'll often hear about are problems with short-term memory, which actually is kind of a misnomer for a number of different things that people can be referring to. So it could be forgetting details of conversation. So they might remember, okay, well, there's so-and-so is getting married in Florida in April, and they'll remember that the wedding is happening, but not, and that it's in Florida, but maybe lose the April part of it. Maybe problems remembering details of upcoming plans, and this is something I hear about a lot. People repeating questions. Oh, when do we have that appointment? What time are we doing this? And a lot of this is really that care partner and person with Parkinson dyad, where the care partner may start taking over all the personal administrative and scheduling things, and so the person with Parkinson's can become a little bit lazy and just, okay, well, they've got it covered, and if they feel anxious about it, they can ask the question, know that the other person has the answer, and never even bother to pay attention to what the answer is. It's just like, okay, was wondering about that appointment. They know, they're on top of it. Itch has been scratched. And then I'll also hear about problems with remembering names of people and places. What's that restaurant? Who is that person? What's that, you know, the neighbor's name that I don't see every day? This is usually lumped in with memory, but it's really what we think of it as more of word finding, which is kind of a related thing. And then there's some of these other stuff that, like, we've all done. I've probably done at least 3 to 4 of these things already today, right? Like, I mean, they're normal kinds of things. Absent-minded forgetfulness. It happens to all of us. It's really sort of a question of increasing frequency of these things and getting to the point where the efficiency of getting through the business of day-to-day life has been slowed down because they happen so often, or they really derail a person's day. Coming from the care partner's perspective or the other person's perspective, some of the mild things that we'll tend to hear about is that someone's maybe more easily distracted, either by other stuff going on around them or maybe other thoughts that they might be having. And things get slower. So the hallmark feature of Parkinson's, the defining feature, is bradykinesia, slower movement. But there's also a bradyphrenia, slower thinking, right? So just like the person with Parkinson can walk across the room, it's going to take them longer. Getting through a thought process also will take longer in many cases. And so what this can be observed in getting through some things that are pretty basic, like perhaps, you know, hygiene and stuff, to more complicated things like thinking through a response to a difficult question. Kind of like Julia was just describing a few moments ago. We also hear about people being less reliable in following a daily routine. Not that it can't happen, it's just that maybe a a door gets left open, maybe a bill doesn't get paid, maybe the mail, not all the mail goes out. These are the kinds of things that we'll be hearing about. The stuff that was on the other slide just happening more often, perhaps needing more prompts and reminders, whereas the person was really kind of self-paced in the past. And then sometimes trouble managing more complex things, like putting on a family reunion, getting through taxes, doing more complicated things like that involve a lot of organization and stepwise procedures, maybe some flexibility. And just generally becoming maybe more easily overwhelmed and confused when there's too many things going on, not being able to focus attention on the most important matter at hand. The more severe problems that we'll start to hear about are people actually, becoming much more forgetful of important events and conversations, not just the little details, and not having a memory that can be queued up with a few prompts. Sometimes problems with reality testing. So when we think about Parkinson psychosis, which can also go along with cognitive changes. Things like visual hallucinations, which may be there and non-bothersome at some points, but sometimes the ability to know what's real and what's not is blurred. Or, is what's happening on television happening in the real world? Discerning, which is which can come up. We also hear a lot about apathy, which means different things to different people, but really just sort of that loss of initiative, that loss of interest, and being maybe agreeable, but not really making suggestions or plans. That is something that can come up. And then sometimes we'll see this confusion and disorientation to more to time of day, but on vacations, this is much more likely to happen. We'll also see some fluctuations, times where a person is pretty cogent and pretty on point, and other times where they really end up very confused, and that sundowning phenomenon, which is really kind of more in the afternoon and evening when there's fatigue overlapping on top of some of the cognitive issues. Whenever we're asking about cognitive changes, we always want to think about what is the actual impact on day-to-day life, right? So we tend to think about these things here. Things like driving. Obviously, there's a big cognitive component to that as well. Paying bills, also working with the more complex financial planning. Someone's still managing investments and taxes and things of this nature. Are they able to do mental arithmetic? Like, okay, you get the check at a restaurant. Are they able to figure out the tip? That kind of thing. Using home technology, we'll ask about the cell phone, the television remote, things like that. Cooking is a big one, especially early on for people who have really enjoyed cooking. If they start to have trouble following a recipe or managing a meal where you've got to kind of multitask, you've got to boil the water, you've got to manage what's going on in the oven, and start chopping the vegetables and kind of organize a lot of things together at the same time for it to come out right.
Turn off the gas grill.
Turn off, yeah, for sure, turning off those things as well, yes. Yeah, that's the safety component there for sure. And then also problems with communication and social interaction, just not being able to process what is being said or to be able to keep up with the conversation and to be able to make the jokes or interject in the same way that they once did. And so when we think about, is there a diagnosis here? We're always really looking at what is that functional impact. So this kind of goes as a gradation down. So it's sort of Parkinson's disease, normal, without any cognitive changes, is the person is getting through the business of day-to-day life without any struggles or limitations whatsoever. When we talk about subjective cognitive decline, which is kind of a newer term, the person themselves may notice, maybe others kind of will see it at some times, but it doesn't really stand out in their mind as being a thing. And some of these folks are still working, but there may be some general like inefficiencies, so it might take a little longer to get the same thing done, or there might be more double checking that's required in order to avoid a mistake. Our next category is mild cognitive impairment, and it is exactly what it sounds like. So what we can see is that there has definitely been a decline in what a person can do on a day-to-day basis. They're needing more assistance than what they needed in the past, especially with complex things. And if they come and they see me or they do a cognitive screen, we'll see some subtle deficits. Nothing major, we'll just see some mild problems, usually in the areas of attention, executive functions like switching from one thing to another, planning and organizing, maybe a little bit of trouble with memory. That's usually more about just not absorbing the information as well. In terms of the impact, there may be some concern about leaving someone with mild cognitive impairment alone overnight, and this would mostly be about, you know, making sure that they're getting their meals done right and they're taking their medication and so forth, not about the safety or judgment. With more progressed mild cognitive impairment, sometimes there can be concerns about driving, using power tools or cleaners in case someone's getting things mixed up. Is this the bleach or the detergent? Which spray am I supposed to use for this? Firearms are a big thing. This is probably actually one of the biggest points of contention that can come up when people have firearms about, you know, are they still safe to use them? It's actually easier for me to have discussions about driving than firearms, despite a lot of evidence, clear evidence, that firearms are no longer a great idea. And believe it or not, this is actually one where I get less support from the care partner. I'll have care partners defending them. No, they need that, we need, and there have already been problems. So it really can be an issue. And as it begins to progress, if there's more significant mild cognitive impairment, there might be concern about leaving the person alone for more than half of a day. So maybe go out and, you know, run errands for the better part of a day, but that's kind of the extent of it. When we talk about dementia, we're talking about loss of functional independence. So this means that someone is going to need some assistance just getting through tasks of everyday living. Could be more, could be less. Could be things like hygiene, could be things like getting through a meal, could be using basic stuff around the home. The person is needing more help. And so maybe they can be left alone for a certain amount of time, but probably not for the whole day. And there would be concern about if someone comes to the door and is selling solar panels, would the person really be able to navigate that situation? If something went wrong with the house, if a toilet started overflowing, would they be able to figure out how to deal with that problem effectively? And when we see it progress more, we can start to see some of the confusion, agitation, things like that. And then at its most progressed, this is where someone is really not able to be left unsupervised for concerns of things that they might do incorrectly or trouble that they might find themselves in. So what are we looking at? What is the likelihood of this? And I adapted this from a recent paper from some other investigators. And so when we look at the time of diagnosis, what we're talking about is generally people who have had some degree of motor symptoms for probably at least 2 to 3 years, and maybe had some other subtle things going on prior to that, because most people with Parkinson's don't get diagnosed until a few years down the road. So the vast majority will appear cognitively normal. We don't see any major problems, nothing significant in day-to-day life related to cognition. We have perhaps maybe 20% that will endure some degree of struggles in day-to-day life, but not that other people are noticing and not that's really impacting life in any discernible way. And maybe 20% that would fall into that mild cognitive impairment group. And an important point to note there is that this will also include some people who perhaps have who will later be diagnosed with like Lewy body dementia, or maybe one of the genetic variants of Parkinson's that's associated with more rapid cognitive decline or early cognitive changes. At about 5 years, you're basically kind of looking at something of a coin toss between whether a person will be fully normal, have some amount of subjective changes that don't have a big impact, or maybe something like mild cognitive impairment. And this is where we begin to see people with starting to show more of the dementia, more of the functional deficits related to cognition. And at 10 years, we're looking at about maybe half of people with Parkinson's having what we would consider to be dementia, meaning that there are functional changes related to cognition that impact the ability to get through day-to-day life. It is very important to note, though, that dementia does not equal Alzheimer's disease. Dementia and Parkinson's looks very different. And it's more about problems with attention and focus, doing things in a stepwise manner, not so much of the rapid forgetting or forgetting who people are around them. That's much less common. So what are the predictors? The risk factors. I'd like to point out that untreated hearing loss. So many people, many older adults, have problems with hearing loss. That's something big in my family. I'm very sensitive to that because I've got some degree of hearing loss now, and I've seen that in family members who have been resistant to getting hearing aids, and man, they really do miss out. And it used to be that they thought that hearing loss was just correlated with cognitive changes, and they weren't really sure why. Now they know that actually untreated hearing loss is predictive of cognitive decline. And the general thinking is that because people aren't hearing as well, they're not participating socially as much, and so they're not using their brain in the same way, so they become much more passive in life rather than active and engaged, and this kind of leads to a more accelerated decline. So that's really very important. Untreated sleep apnea is the similar one. A lot of evidence showing just what an impact that can have. Outside of Parkinson's, it causes just kind of global loss of oxygen to the brain every time a person sleeps. And that can definitely contribute a cerebrovascular, meaning a blood flow to the brain problem outside of the Parkinson's process. Isolation is another big one. That's why it's so great to see all of you here and why it's so important to remain socially active. Not being active and not using your brain in that way really is predictive of accelerated decline. Excessive alcohol use I'm just kind of throwing that in there because it's true for most everything. It's not something that we actually see a lot because excessive alcohol use and Parkinson's don't mix very well. It's pretty rare that I'll have a conversation about that. The protective factors, the flip side of isolation, social activities, physical activity, that's why there's such an emphasis on exercise and movement. It's absolutely critical. And then, of course, just having a good, healthy diet. All right. So one thing that I'd like to touch on here just a little bit to try to illustrate what these cognitive symptoms look like in Parkinson's is that we talk about there being different symptoms of Parkinson's. We say cognitive stuff, we talk about motor symptoms, we talk about autonomic stuff like digestion, heart rate, regulating body temperature, and we talk about psychiatric stuff, mood and anxiety, and we tend to talk about these things as though they occur in isolation, but they don't. That is not the case. The person who's experiencing these things experiences them all together, and they all overlap. And so really, I think when you're talking about what a person's experience is, you're really talking about this part here, where all these different things are kind of occurring at the same time. It's not like, okay, cognition, you can take a side seat, mood and anxiety is coming in. No, they're all kind of going together. So just to give you some examples, if someone's having cognitive issues, the distraction from, constipation is leading them to feeling uncomfortable, and then it's further impacting their ability to think clearly on what's going on around them. If there's, problems with anxiety, then that's going to impact their ability to think clearly about what's happening there in the moment. There's this dual tasking phenomenon. So if someone has a tremor and they're trying to suppress it, they can, perhaps. They can focus on it, make it go away, but then they're not thinking about what they're doing. They're not thinking about what they need to say, or, the simple kind of walking and talking at the same time. That's often something that really is not able to be done safely. We have conversations with our patients saying, okay, when the person's walking, especially if they're having freezing of gait or some other things, just focus on the walking and avoid the fall. Don't try to multitask at these times. And then there's lots of cognitive examples. So for people who have, bladder urgency, if there's some cognitive deficits, they might not be able to make that mental map of, okay, I go out this room to the right and then another right and there's the bathroom. And so that makes it harder to go out places and can lead to avoidance. With cognitive decline, sometimes people aren't able to use those coping strategies to talk themselves through and talk themselves down for situations where they're feeling anxious or unsettled. Or with the motor symptoms, it's very important to follow that medication schedule, take the right medications, the right amount at the right time. And with these cognitive changes, it's really hard. In fact, it's hard to get someone to take one pill one time a day reliably. And you're talking about 3 to 4 times a day or more, and this pill here, and half of one there, and throw in another 2 there, and next month it's going to be different. That's a lot to manage. So you add the cognitive stuff on there, and it's even more so. So this kind of ran off the screen, but it says, okay, so you have concerns about cognition. All right, so this is maybe a self-help book that you threw behind you at one point, but this is my favorite one that I've ever read. It was written forever ago by Dale Carnegie, the guy who wrote How to Win Friends and Influence People. And so what he did is, he says that he struggled tremendously with anxiety through his life. And so he interviewed a bunch of people who were really very effective in managing anxiety and tried to figure out what is the special sauce. How is it that they were able to succeed where others would have probably failed? And so he kind of distilled down, what are the common things that these people did that allowed them to succeed and persevere. So the first one, he said, is just analyze your situation fearlessly, take a full inventory of it, and gather the information, gather the facts. Next, with that information in mind, you reconcile yourself to accept the worst possible scenario that can happen. And it's important to reconcile because this then allows your mind to be at peace to actually then start to do step number 3, which is to focus your time and energy on improving on the worst scenario that can happen. So this is a general framework of how I like to kind of think about, all right, moving forward with perhaps going through and getting an evaluation. So the first thing that you can do is to just request a screening examination. Sometimes at some centers this will happen at regular intervals, other times perhaps not. But this is, it can be done by your primary care doc, but certainly also can be done by your neurologist. And so what I think is important is to actually have a visit that focuses on this so that the cognitive concerns aren't kind of lumped in with a bunch of other stuff and perhaps not really discussed or investigated. So I'd dedicate a visit for this purpose. That'll also allow the provider to do the time of actually doing some amount of testing, brief testing, which is important. I think if you're going to do this, I would also say to bring a list, not like a whole journaling of all the problems that if you're the patient that you noticed, or that your care, if you're the care partner, not all the things the other person has goofed up, but just a list, some highlighted bullets so you can make sure that they're aware of what you've observed. And the testing process is usually 10 to 30 minutes perhaps, same as a typical doctor's visit. And what it gives you is it gives you just a single global score, like one number that kind of says, all right, where are we at? Does this look totally normal? Might we have something, or is this something maybe more like dementia? And then usually they can give you feedback and recommendations based on this screening. The formal assessment is where I come in. And so this is for situations where maybe a person has done a screening, but it still remains a little bit murky. Maybe were there other factors that were making the scores look low? Is it anxiety or is it cognitive changes? What's actually contributing here? Or differential diagnosis, different stages of Parkinson's, or is this our general kind of garden variety Parkinson's disease, or one of the more atypical or unusual presentations? And then pre and post surgical evaluation. So really I'm talking about deep brain stimulation surgery. We always get a pre-surgical evaluation and follow up a year or so later for post-surgical. We also consider this if the person is working in a high-stakes job and they don't want to start having subtle deficits where a small error or oversight could prove really costly or present a safety risk. If someone's living alone, so they don't have a care partner who's there to observe the little slips and mistakes along the way, or if they're also providing care to someone else, a parent or a spouse. We often see that the person with Parkinson's is also a care partner for someone with something else. If there's a strong family history of dementia, where the possibility that the person's going to experience more significant or rapid decline is there. Or if someone is just really anxious about dementia. We see this a lot. We call it weary well, where maybe they took care of their parent or someone else, or they just had for whatever reason, they've just become very concerned that they're experiencing significant decline and just want to kind of get some kind of results objective that will assuage those concerns. So these assessments are performed by someone like myself, and so we're licensed clinical psychologists, but our focus has been really kind of in neurology. So we sort of have one foot in neurology and then one foot in psychology, and our focus in graduate school, as well as in our internship and our 2-year fellowship, is looking at changes that come up with different neurologic conditions. For me, I've really always been fascinated by movement disorders. I started with Huntington's, but really wanted to go to Parkinson's, where my passion is, because it is complex and it's challenging, but it's also, there's a lot of hope for it. So that's what really drew me to it. So ideally, if you're going to see someone, you'll find someone who really has not just the ability to do it, but the training and real native interest in working with Parkinson's.
Is Huntington's disease similar to Lou Gehrig's, or the same thing? Is it the same?
No, that would be.
I got a real good friend that has Lou Gehrig's.
Yeah, that would be ALS, is Lou Gehrig's, but Huntington's also very unfortunate. But it's a 3 to 4 hour evaluation, which sounds like a lot, but the bolded points there, if you can make that out, are really kind of what the person experiences. I do the medical record review before the person gets there. It's the interview, testing, and feedback, and usually we do this all in one day. And then you leave, and then we write it all up. So let me just talk through this a little bit. So the interview is really just, it's meat and potato stuff. Talking about, all right, what are the concerns that have you in here? All right, what are the cognitive changes? What's been observed? It's great if you're, as the care partner, can be there to provide some extra perspective. I like to talk to the person with Parkinson's first, and then just to get their raw take on stuff, and then get the other person's perspective. And then we only really touch on medical history as it would be relevant. I'm not going through everything. It's really just the stuff that could bear on cognition. And then a little bit of a bio, who you are, where you're from, and that gives us a context to try to understand these results. And then the next part is the testing, which nobody looks forward to. Well, now there are a few people who I don't know what they're masochistic or whatever, that they really like this, but most people do not. It takes between 60 to maybe 120 minutes, and the goal here is to do enough testing that we can be confident in whatever conclusions we're coming to, but not hit the point of exhaustion where more becomes less. And we also want to make sure that we assess these different domains of functioning so that we can look at patterns of strengths and weaknesses. And one thing that I will say is that all the tests that are used here are hard. Nobody gets them all right, as opposed to the screening where ideally you'd like to get, if it's out of 30 points, you want to get 30 out of 30. For these, no, nobody does. But that's really important because that gives us a better baseline. It gives us a much better measurement. So if someone, let's say, goes from superior on something and then drops down to average range, that's a problem. But if we just do a screener, average and superior look the same, so we can't identify those changes. Feedback, always good to have someone else there for this process. We discuss there, whatever our conclusions are and go through the test so that it's not just some abstract thing like, this is dementia, so long. It's going to be like, here's why we say this. Here are the tests that show us this, so that we can talk it through. And then we'll go through these recommendations, medications to use and avoid, certain types of therapy. We might want more workup, could be some neuroimaging. Kind of really just depends on who the person is coming in the door, whether we're talking about employment or safety, and then whether additional resources seem to be required. So you've been through the evaluation process. What do we do moving forward? So this is the outcome we all hope for, that we all want to see. Everything looks normal, okay? This would be kind of our worried well. So this is good. So now if someone has gone through the process, they can stop second guessing themselves. So it's not like, oh my gosh, this is the Parkinson. I'm heading down. I missed that appointment the other day, or I double paid this bill, and now it's all coming apart. No, you can stop doing that and analyzing and doing this meta-analysis, which is only keeping you away from being able to participate fully in the real world. It also means that we don't put unnecessary limitations on things. Okay, cognition looks good. If you're concerned about driving, get a driving evaluation. There's no cognitive reason to not do that, or continue working. We don't see any reason that someone who's doing this well on tests would not be able to continue in this profession. We don't prescribe medications that aren't needed. You don't want to start taking a bunch of medications. As the older we get, the more those medications can pile up. So we don't start doing that. But it also means that we can use medications that might potentially impact cognition a little bit, but could really help out with other Parkinson's symptoms. So it's really helpful to know that, okay, some of these medications that can be a little bit more messy are still useful. It's still an option. That also would include things like DBS, the deep brain stimulation surgery. And then we really then just kind of focus on preserving health and keeping people in this normal cognitive state. And there's the baseline if needed. It doesn't mean that we want to repeat just to keep assessing someone. We don't do that. More testing equals less good results. There's practice effects, measurement error, and so forth. So it's not just that we need to see someone every year. That is not helpful. So let's suppose the outcome is mild cognitive impairment. Well, this can be useful because then there's less uncertainty about what's causing the problems that we're seeing. We know that there has been some kind of a cognitive change. They've been described in day-to-day life. We do the testing and we see performances that are lower than expectations for a person's age, education, other background factors, and we know that they're doing lower and that there is some cognitive impairment on board. Knowing these weaknesses, we can avoid unpleasant, unfortunate consequences. And knowing strengths means that we don't impose some kind of global limitations, right? We don't say, okay, well, no, you can't do this anymore because there's a problem with attention. Maybe memory is still just fine. Maybe there is a little bit of forgetfulness, but there aren't any cognitive issues that would bear on driving. So maybe driving is still okay, right? We're just getting information to know, what we can and can't do, because all of this is about improving quality of life with Parkinson's, and we certainly do not want to impinge unnecessarily on someone's independence. This also allows us, the ability to figure out what medications to use and to avoid. We continue focusing on preserving health, and once again, we have a baseline for comparison. So if there is further cognitive decline in the future, we can compare, because now we'll see, all right, has there been some kind of an evolution over time? If we want to do surgical interventions, like in the case of deep brain stimulation surgery, or if the diagnosis remains uncertain. So if I see someone early on who's been recently diagnosed and I see some cognitive changes, maybe I'll want to see them again in a year or so to make sure that we're not looking at something like Lewy body disease or something that would progress more rapidly. And then we have dementia. This is not a word that I like saying, no one likes hearing, but there can be some relief that comes with it when that is the situation. We have a name for the struggles. We don't have to fear the name. We could say it. This is dementia, all right? And I didn't know that we were going to be talking about the grief process, but yeah, this can facilitate the grief process. And moving really kind of from fear toward acceptance of, okay, so this is what we're dealing with. We know what to call it. Now we can start moving forward. And for many people, it relieves the burden of trying to hide or cover up or explain away the mistakes that someone else is making. You can say, well, yeah, they have Parkinson's. They've got the dementia that can come with Parkinson's. The other thing that can be really good from this evaluation process, even if the outcome is dementia, is we can determine what the cause of it is. Usually, if we do our job right, we can say whether this is dementia related to Parkinson's or dementia related to Alzheimer's. Well, because you can have Parkinson's and Alzheimer's together, unfortunately, it's possible. Or vascular disease, like meaning stroke or other things, chronic bad blood flow to the brain. And this then allows us to really kind of start making some appropriate adjustments to our expectations and our plans. That's something that has been mentioned a lot of times by a number of people already today. But the key is that they're appropriate, and we're not going overboard. We're not putting things into place that don't need to be, but we're also not avoiding opportunities to make things better and to avoid problems. This is also a great time to start to make sure that things are set up for things like estate planning and determining who's going to be making medical and financial decisions. The sooner you never want to make a dementia diagnosis, but the sooner that it's made, the sooner you can get that person's real perspective and their good input in on how they want things to be, so that they're making the decisions, and that the life that is there, after they pass, we're all going to pass, but that they leave behind has the most influence from them on it, and not what other people think they would have wanted. This also allows us to get more support resources, and this varies kind of location by location, state by state. Dementia diagnosis stinks, but it does come with certain additional benefits that can be brought to bear. Respite care, things like that, home health, other things. And what we really try to do is focus on quality of life and making sure that the care partner is really included in this, because the care partner is going to need some help. That loss of functional independence means that that's going to be a burden on the care partner. So kind of putting it all together, changes in thinking are common in Parkinson's disease. We can see some mild stuff kind of early on. Progression to dementia, it occurs in about half of people with Parkinson's at about 10 years. And it is oftentimes difficult to decide, is this a cognitive change or is this something else? Is this some other complexity of Parkinson's making it harder for the person to think clearly or remember things well? I think evaluations are important. I wouldn't do what I do if I didn't think that it was helpful. And I think screening is a really good first step if there's concerns. And then if there's something more that's needed or if there's additional answers that are needed, that's where that comprehensive neuropsychological evaluation comes in. But really kind of regardless of the outcomes, the evaluations are helpful in informing treatment options, everything from medications to take for cognition, medications that wouldn't be needed, medication for motor symptoms to favor versus avoid, and you know, whether things like surgical options would be a good idea. And really kind of the key is balancing safety concerns with independence for the highest quality of life, because you know, working in a Parkinson Center of Excellence, it's all about quality of life and preserving independence. Everything that we're doing, from the speech to the OT to the mental health stuff, it's all about quality of life, and so preserving independence is a really important part of that. So stay safe, but also independent, and getting that balance right. And then finally, planning for the future. So even if we start to see some more severe impairments, we can start planning for the future earlier rather than later, getting caught by surprise. So that is what I have got. So thank you very much. Once again, thank you all for being here. Especially thank you to our panelists. I had an opportunity, the privilege of meeting with them by Zoom a couple of weeks ago to discuss, you know, how could we make this helpful for the group. So I got to hear a little bit of kind of their stories as care partners and the kinds of things that they're experiencing and working through as related to cognitive changes in Parkinson's. And they all have a lot of really great perspectives. Just briefly, we have Dr. Jong, who is here, the care partner for his wife. We have Karen Andrews, who is care partner for her husband. And we have Victoria Helmly, who is a care partner for her father, who has Parkinson's disease. I was thinking that I would start with Karen. Karen, you were explaining that it sounds like your husband is having some of more mild kinds of changes, some things that are different than how it was before, where you're needing to step in a little bit and assist more. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, sure. And let's see, Annie asked me if I would stand up when I would talk. Is that okay? All right. Yeah. Thank you. Well, thank you for being here. Certainly, we appreciate you sharing your expertise with all of us. It means a lot. So my husband was diagnosed with Parkinson's. Better? Thank you. My husband was diagnosed with Parkinson's about 17 years ago. And we've been on this journey or path, if you will, from subjective to more of a mild cognitive impairment for probably about 5 years. He has had the DBS surgery, and as a result of that, we have gone through some of the more formal assessments. And I think much like Dr. Turner shared, it's certainly not one of my husband's favorite things to do. I'll note it's also a little bit difficult as the care partner, because if you are in maybe one of the shorter evaluations, right, you're sitting behind your loved one and they're asking him or her these questions, and I don't know, you try to have that Dr. Spock moment, right? Where you just feel like, I'm gonna will to you 5 words that start with the letter F, and you're gonna be able to say them really quick, right?
Yeah.
And so it's really hard to not be able to be there and be helping them, because that's what you want to do. I will say that my husband's cognitive changes that we speak about are much more so in his off periods. And, when his carbidopa-levodopa is diminishing in his body, when we're at the end of that dose, or as sundowning, as you noted, where maybe we're at the end of the day where we're not going to be taking any more medication. So there certainly is more of a change there. I think as I've, in my very non-clinical manner of understanding this, I've come to understand, our body produces dopamine, and that dopamine is critical the way brain cells are communicating. So as you have less brain cell communication, you therefore have variable physical movements, and then you have variable movement in regards to your thinking. So waves, my husband's changes, if you will, they are more around where he has a difficult time describing what he wants to say. He has difficulty summarizing his thoughts, his considerations, difficulty recalling his words. And so what we found was happening much more so when we first started to notice it, absolutely the apathy that you spoke about. Because he was just shutting down in these social situations. And suddenly my husband, who always had a lot to say, I mean, he was the absolute extrovert in the room. The party did not start until Wayne Andrews showed up, right? And now I would look, and we could go through, hours meeting with friends. We could go through a whole meal. We could go through a 6-hour car ride down to Florida. We could go for a 1-hour walk, and he just didn't have anything to say. He just had less to say. And when I would ask him maybe about a news article that he read, or a story that was meaningful for him, a movie that he saw, it was clear. He couldn't summarize what transpired. It's not that he didn't understand it. I knew my husband understood it. He couldn't get it from here to here in really a meaningful, efficient way. So, we just had to talk about it. We had to pray about it. We had to talk about it, and we had to acknowledge, okay, this is another Parkinson's thing. Great. So what do we do now? And we did some adaptation, which I think everyone's speaking about, just kind of acknowledging what an issue is, and then doing something a little bit differently until you find something that works. And we also had to know and focus in on, what was most important to him. And the most important thing to him was that he could still engage with his friends. He could still be somehow an active participant in a group. So it was really difficult when it would lean in toward the depression that we saw him seeing as well, because he was, as I noted before, kind of very much shutting down. So now, our change. We do things with another couple or another special friend. We tend to just stay in our small groups, and we don't get into large group settings where conversations flow quickly and topics are fluctuating all the time, because that's when we'll just see him slowly shutting down more and more and more. And I try to, in a smaller group, it's much less obtrusive if I'm helping him find a word or helping him recall a story. And I can even say, like, oh my gosh, honey, tell Don and Laura what happened when we were in Publix and that funny thing that happened in the produce aisle, where otherwise he might be in a scenario and just not be able to think of something to say. So, I guess in hindsight, I think for us it was important to understand, what was not just the problem of the moment, what was causing this change in his behavior and his outlook, but what did he need to feel better about himself? And we recognized he needed to once again find a way to be able to be engaging and be with family and be with friends and have a good time. So you know, those smaller groups for us, that was key, and understanding that I might need to listen with maybe just a little bit more of an ear, so that I could hear. I never want to finish his words for him. I think we've all been in those scenarios, right? And that's not what I wanted to do. But I wanted to have just that one extra ear so I could help prompt him with some verbal cues when these different things started happening. So, you know, it's Parkinson's. We all know it. It's everything's going to change and things are going to come at you in different directions. You can't control all of it. But I think the loved one that we have, we can understand what's most important to him or her, and then find some things that, you know, can positively impact what they can do for some of that normalcy, which you know, really helps sustain them throughout the day.
Oh, that's really great. Just before letting you off the hook here, I think it's get back up. So it sounds like one of the things that you found to be really helpful is in these smaller social settings where there's less conversations bouncing around and ever changing. He's more likely to be able to engage, and if you kind of tee him up a little bit with a story, that will get him started, because he has a harder time just coming up out of the clear blue with an idea of something to talk about, even if it's interesting for him. If you tee it up, then he'll be better to participate.
Yeah, I think that's true, and you know, and I comment to people often, gosh, I wish you knew way before Parkinson's, right? Because such a difference. Today, I mean, still, everybody loves my husband. You know, it's all, oh, you know, Karen, she's Wade's wife, right? And I love that, but it's definitely a different personality than he has now. So, to your question, Dr. Turner, yes, my prompting will enable him to recall something he wants to tell. He still won't entertain the room. He still won't engage in a conversation like, you know, he once was able to. But it does help him to have something to say and to be actively conversing in some manner in that situation. Yeah.
Gotcha. And do you find that there are times of the day that you try to schedule these events where you know he's going to be a little bit more on point or not still having the wearing off thing?
Yeah, we do. It's we used to be, you know, more so in that 7 o'clock, 7:30 hour if we're going to go out and socialize, and now, you know, we're looking for that 4:30, that, you know, that 5 o'clock time frame.
The early bird.
I mean, you get the senior citizen discount, so you can't go out with that, right? But also, yes, much more so the off times, late at night, that when the medicine is just not as impactful. So we try to avoid, unless, and I'll make one exception, right? I mean, there's certainly, when he's very stressed or anxious, absolutely worse, absolutely. So there are some family members, there are some dear friends, he's fine. You know, whatever his physical symptoms are, he's fine. Whatever his cognitive symptoms are in front of them, he's fine. But, you know, if it's outside of that small circle, then we're being very careful to do these engagements during a very definitive on time.
Gotcha. Okay, that sounds like an important workaround strategy there, is to kind of set the stage for success in that way. The only other thing that I wanted to ask briefly about was, since your husband had DBS, did you notice any cognitive changes after he had the surgery that seemed that maybe they were related to DBS itself?
I did, and you know, I hesitate to say that, it's, again, and not fully understanding the full realm of it. But he did, the cognitive decline. He had his DBS, it will be about 3.5 years ago. It's been instrumental. As I noted, he's 17 years old, he's had it for 17 years. He's boxing, he's doing Tai Chi, he's, you know, still doing wonderful, wonderful things, and I know that's been largely enabled through the DBS. But I also recognize that there was, you know, some impact with his cognition. So we did see some of those changes as a result of that.
Gotcha. Thank you. Yeah, so that's one of the reasons why I always do those assessments before and after, because we sometimes do see those changes, and then for people who have more significant problems prior to surgery, that's where we become concerned that risk-benefit changes if someone's going to lose independence and not have a net gain in terms of quality of life after.
Yeah, very much so.
Great, thank you. Well, I guess so. I'm not the rule maker. I'm looking at Annie.
Are there statistics on cognitive loss after DBS?
There are some. It's an evolving thing, and I'll just answer this briefly because it's a whole talk. And if you haven't noticed, I like to talk. I have a PhD in talking, essentially. But the science has been a little hard because we can't say, okay, let's randomly assign one person to get DBS surgery and one person, no, sorry, you would qualify for it, but you can't have it. And that would be the only way we could really, really systematically say what happens cognitively if you get DBS versus if you don't. So the statistics aren't great, but where we tend to see more of a decline cognitively is with communication, actually. Verbal fluency, word finding, that kind of thing. And it's not everyone who experiences it. Some people do. Some people notice it and then testing looks exactly the same, no changes. Other people say, no problem, still speaking and I do just fine. And then we do the testing, like all the F words, and they're much lower. So it's a weird thing that we haven't yet understood. So that's the shortest answer I can give you to a very good question.
And the surgeons never mentioned.
The surgeons have tunnel vision on the motor symptom that they're trying to address.
Right.
That's what they do, and that's no fault. They're there to say, okay, you've got a tremor, you want me to knock it out, I'll knock that tremor out. And that's going to be what they're looking at. We're okay, we have dystonia, let's address that. And that's the goal, and so that's where I come in, the thorn in the heel in these surgical, interdisciplinary surgical conversations. Thank you. Great question. Dr. Jong, when we were talking, you expressed that your wife has some more significant cognitive changes that have occurred. And one of the things that you told me that it was a real pearl of wisdom, you began to describe the importance of this structure in the day and how you have things in a routine way so that there aren't the fluctuations and that you're not getting caught off guard by symptoms.
Sure, thank you. Thank you. My name is Dr. Jong. I'm so honored here to be as a primary caregiver to my wife over 45 years. And she came down with the diagnosis of Parkinson's 22 years ago when she was only 51. But however, thinking back, now I know a little bit more about Parkinson. She did have some real symptoms prior to that diagnosis, but I never paid attention to looking for it. I think there are a lot of people who have the same kind of things. Now, since 22 years, post 10 plus years, she did very well. Even people, friends of us, who did not recognize she had any problems, unless I told her to she had. But as the time goes by, now it comes to the cognitive dysfunction where sometimes, I know she's sitting here, but does not know me sometimes, with some memory loss and confusion does come. But these things are, to me, is so much different day to day. Some articles I have read some time ago, they surveyed on the slide, they said 10 years, but this survey had about 2 groups of PD with their caregivers given the same questions. What are those the 3 most common symptoms or problems having with your patient and caregivers? And then A group was the history of only 6 years, and the other group over 6 years. Now, post group less than 6 years, there are 3 things were more like a slowness, tremor, and stiffness, which all know has something to do with the motor dysfunctions. while the other group, over 60 years, number one was the fluctuating response to the medication one is taking, followed by the mood changes with depression, anxiety, apathy, cognitive dysfunction, and so on. And then third one was the grueling. But if I look at the all further down to the amount of 10, only one tremor was complaining there, but all other ones are non-motor problems as they get having the problem over than 10 years. But now my wife does have the not only motor symptoms, which by the way controlled very well, which is a treat sign on the talking to you. But this cognitive dysfunctions with mood changes is very, very difficult. So day to day is a lot different what she is showing. So what I do when I get up in the morning in bed, try to plan out what I'm gonna do this one to make sure this medication she's taking stays consistently throughout the day possible. So I will be talking about what I do to overcome the fluctuating responses. Number one, in our life, timing is very important. However, giving the medication with the heavy levodopa for the patient is very, very critically important. I would say, if I miss the window of the medication, to me that doesn't seem to be the case. So I always go by half an hour before meal or 1 hour after meal, based on our day schedule. That's one thing. Second thing is that even with the meals, if there's too much protein in the diet or too much fat, I do know we have to give a little bit more time pass, have that fat and protein be digested before medicine goes in. So before half an hour might be okay, but if I anticipate she's going to have a big meal, and then I give the medicines maybe 2 hours after the food, so that before the medicine goes up a little bit better. Thirdly, some other medications one is taking, probably doctors giving some iron for some reason or another, or people take the multiple vitamins which is plentiful iron. This iron always fighting each other with the dopamine. So maybe you consider giving the little space out between among the two medications. Second category will be the exercise. Now, exercise is very, very important. Every place I read about it, you stay out there 2.5 hours exercise per week. However, I have noticed that if I take an hour to golf, I mean, the medication is not due until 1 or 2 hours still, but all of a sudden, just like my old cell phone going down the drain down the battery, she virtually cannot raise up the golf clubs around that time after a few hours out. So I think about it, it's gotta be something to do with the over heavy activity or exercise, maybe draining out the medications. So I always bring my extra medication in my pocket. I give the medicines. Sure enough, about 10-15 minutes later, where's my club? So she just take a few minutes to put in the car. So I don't want to do what I do, but please do check with your doctor whether there will be something anticipating or can be done some extra pills a little bit sooner. So I got the permission with the doctor, so I'm free to give those medications to overcome with the fluctuating of the responses. Another category is the constipations. I know most of you are patients with DPD, you have a constipation, but this medication being absorbed through the part of small intestine, if you don't go over 3 days of a bowel movement, you know for sure medication does not go up to the brain as expected, which is true or false. I always pick up there some weird symptoms or some unusual behavior comes up by checking out the when you poop. So sure enough, if that goes up, I have all kind of resources trying to make it hard to go almost every day, if not every other day, with the diet and the fruit, sometimes and so on. Another item is that the sleeping. If she doesn't sleep, some reason or another, the next day, all that the medical and medication efficacy seems to be everywhere. Doesn't seem to be just like the other days. So I try to make some good sleep habit so that she can get the good proper sleep. She will do much better very next day. Lastly, stress. Now we all do have a stress more so maybe to the caregivers. A caregiver has their stressful day. I think they will go into the patients. She'll get stressed out. Everything goes yo up and down. So I have learned over the years, I have in my mind what you should do that I shouldn't do it. Like I don't argue, but I cannot do it. I try not to argue, not to question it, not to reason, not to testing anything like day before there is such a things. They will putting up more stress and then giving their response to medication becomes so much unpredictable. And lastly, we all caregivers, I think other speakers didn't mention earlier, we should be checking out their own well-being. We gotta live healthier so that we can give our best care to the patients. And then sadly, one of the articles I read, 63% of the caregiver does go before the patients. So if I go, who's gonna look at me after all? So
medication with a new date on it. Put that in. I know, Phil, I know. I'm just giving you, you know, these are things that we need to hear and know. Now, emergency surgeons and stuff, I'm just scared to death like the rest of you, because there just isn't an answer. You know, everybody is running and doing stuff, so be the helicopter care partner. Stay on them,
I agree.
advocate for your loved one, and make somebody listen, you know, yeah.
Thank you so much, Julia. And Julia will be around this afternoon, right, to answer everybody's questions? Julia, everybody. Well, thank you guys so much for sticking around and sticking with us. I am so excited to announce, I'm excited about all of our speakers, but my personal and dear friend, Tiffany McCusker, is a speech language pathologist out of Northside Hospital, Forsyth. She's been practicing for 15 years. She's amazing on a personal level and on a professional level. So I'm really excited to finally get her to one of our programs. So Tiffany, without further ado, hang tight with us. I know we're going to go a little bit longer than we said we would, but this information is going to be really valuable. So Tiffany, take it away.
Hey, thank you so much. Okay. So yes, I am Tiffany McCusker. Good afternoon. I am almost a little hesitant to follow those amazing care partners and Dr. Turner. They gave they took some of my advice I was going to give, honestly. But I am here to present on navigating communication changes, something really near and dear to my heart in my practice. Oh, thank you. Okay. So yes, I am at Northside Forsyth Hospital. I've actually worked at all the major hospital systems here in Atlanta, Wellstar, Emory, Northside. I've been working 15 years, and I have been LSVT Loud certified for the past 7. And I have my degree from the University of Georgia. Go Dogs. Yeah. All right. So first, before we start talking about how we can navigate communication changes, and some of this is going to be a tiny bit of overlap from what Dr. Turner was talking about, but I want to look at the types of communication changes, 3 different buckets: motor speech, cognitive communication, and voice. And just to note, as most of you probably know, 75 to 90% of people with Parkinson's will experience some of these communication changes at some point. So we'll start with speech changes, and I have 2 different, the same audio samples we'll do for this slide and the next, and some samples of what we're looking at. So when I talk about speech, I'm really talking about motor speech, not language, not word finding. We'll come to that in a minute. This is really just articulation, how something is being said. What we typically do see with Parkinson's are these listed here: the slurring, the rushed mumbled articulation, followed by like a burst. So there would be like a hesitation, a pause, and then that rush of speech that kind of comes out. And then overall reduced intelligibility, really just meaning people are having trouble understanding them. So we're going to play this sample, hopefully it plays. And with this, I just want you to listen to the motor speech. I want you to listen to the articulation and what this patient sounds like.
What was the name? It drops in the air, they take a prism and put a rainbow. The rainbow is a division of white light into many beautiful colors in shape of a long round arch with its path high above and 2 ends apparently beyond the horizon.
So as you can hear, a lot of those pause, then a quick rush of speech that's kind of slurred and mumbled and it's hard to understand. So the next piece is voice changes. We talk about voice, we actually talk about the vocal system, which is the vocal cords, the diaphragm, the air production, and a lot of what you can see is it is an earlier indicator of Parkinson's sometimes are those vocal changes that you're not even aware of what's causing that. The reduced volume, vocal tremors, the monopitch, so just that tone, that monotone, where there's not a lot of up and down, there's not a lot of changes, it makes the person sound and look even flatter, that there's just not a lot of variation. Breathiness and hoarseness. So we'll listen to the same sample again for just a second. This time I want you to listen to the voice. The way the voice sounds very low. This patient, it was very hard to hear him for his care partner. And just the breathiness and the hoarseness and the monopitch as well.
What was the name?
drops in the air as they in prison. And from rainbow, the rainbow is a division of white light into many beautiful colors.
So again, just that low volume, the breathiness, not a lot of change in that pitch either way. So then cognitive communication, and as Dr. Turner talked about, there's just a wide array of changes that can happen cognitively. I'll focus on the ones that I see impact communication the most. Word finding impairments, being able to find that tip of the tongue syndrome. It's right there, I know it, I'm not sure. Slow processing of language, both production and reception, and I will touch on this a couple times throughout. I think it's not recognized quite enough where, a lot of times these persons with Parkinson's, they have trouble processing language. And it's not that they're not understanding what's being said, it takes them longer to get there. It takes them longer to process what is being told to them. Then that reduced attention, Karen talked about this a lot, difficulty following a conversation, especially in that group setting, when they're pinging back and forth between changing topics, changing ideas, and like you're talking about, they just withdraw and say, well, I'm just, I can't keep up with this. I love the advice she gave about kind of halting the conversation for a second and saying, oh, hey, my husband has a story about that. And even if you're the one that tells the story, it still does make them feel included in the conversation and less likely to withdraw. You can help aid that. And then executive dysfunction, planning, being flexible with their cognition, and initiation. Initiation's a huge one. Apathy, where they're just not even starting a conversation. They just don't have that kick in the brain that's telling them, hey, maybe I should start talking at this point. So what can be done? What are some treatment options? We'll start with the one I'm a little biased on, speech therapy. So, to kind of bridge on what everybody was talking about with hospitals and finding therapists and physicians, I do think it is important to find a speech therapist who is knowledgeable and certified with Parkinson's. They can be LSVT loud certified, speak out certified also, but that they just have some experience, because you're going to have a more fluid, supportive experience if you do have a therapist who has experience in this realm. Because it does, we have a wide range of people that we see, and if you don't have that knowledge and background, sometimes it's not as good of a fit as it could be. So with LSVT loud, I'm sure most of you probably know, but evidence-based intensive treatment option, the recommended treatment course is 4 times a week for 4 weeks, which is a lot, but that's a lot of the reason that it does work so well. And it is really working on improving both the perception of volume for the person with Parkinson's, how they're perceiving their own volume, as well as actual functional production. Speak Out is another treatment option. It targets speech and voice and cognition individually and in a group setting. And then over here are some different apps and different what we call like augmentative things that you can use. So these apps, Speak Up for Parkinson's, blah, 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 and sound level meters. With these, what these provide is visual biofeedback. And so basically is showing a person with Parkinson's, here's where we want you to be, here's where you actually are. I find that to be helpful just because as a care partner, it's not always as helpful, impactful if you're the one that's always saying, you're not loud enough, you're not loud enough. I mean, I know for my kids, they do a lot better hearing criticism from a coach or a teacher than they do from me. And I know my patients, they do a lot better hearing it from me than they do from their care partners. So sometimes having a objective, non-biased device that's saying, hey, you need to be 80 decibels and you're at 50, this is something that's going to give you that feedback and that support. So I do like these apps. Another option is Speech5. It's actually a medical device that prompts a user to speak louder. It gives them background noise. It's kind of like a hearing aid, and I'm pretty sure it's covered by Medicare. But it does give them, they feel like they have to speak over a little bit of background noise, so it prompts them to actually speak a little bit louder. There's actually a free app if you want to just play around with it and sample the use of it. I like this. I thought it was pretty neat. Voice amplifiers, these are just 2 options, Chatterbox and Windbridge. They, it's just like a portable amplification system. And then AAC apps. So AAC is augmentative and alternative communication. These are options that can be helpful, especially in some of the later stages of Parkinson's, if a patient is really having trouble with communicating at all, or sometimes honestly in a hospital setting too. It gives different set phrases that they might use pretty frequently, or pictures, or anything that they can point to and it'll speak for them. So it is an option. Alpha Topics and ProLQ for text are two examples that I've liked in the past. So how can care partners support this communication? I am all about acronyms and anything that'll help me remember something and anybody else. So Carrie King, I borrowed this from her, the idea of this. She's a therapist out in Canada working with Parkinson's. But we're going to go through speech for care partners. So the S, spotlight the face. Okay, so always make sure that your care partner, as a care partner, when you're speaking with somebody, that they can see your face. Establish that attention. Make sure, hey, I want to talk to you for a minute. Get eye contact with them. Get close to them. Try, if you can, to avoid yelling across the house to each other. That's a common thing in therapy. I yelled to them from the kitchen and they didn't hear me. Well, okay. Try and get close. Try and kind of get right there in their face, even if you need to. But using eyes and ears when communicating, we do rely so much on just listening to speech, but so much of it is what we see. Body language, just making sure that someone is following the conversation. P, so pausing in your speech. Now with this one, I don't actually mean stopping the speech and walking away, although that is one we'll come to in a minute. This is actually going back to what I was talking about earlier with receptive speech, how well they are processing what you are telling them. You do want to try and slow down your speech a little bit. I'm not talking about exaggerating how slow you are, but just give yourself time and give them time to process what you're saying. Pause between ideas or pieces of information. So if you're telling them two things, hey, we're going to go to the doctor and then we're going to go to lunch, try and say it like that. Instead of saying, we're going to go to the doctor and then go to lunch. We're going to go to the doctor, then we're going to go to lunch. It seems really simple. That actually does give a lot of time to process two separate ideas. Asking for clarification, asking if they understood. The way I do like to ask that, though, instead of kind of putting that burden on them of saying, did you understand? I like to say, was I clear? Did that make sense? And that way it kind of puts it on me, did I say it correctly? So that way it's not always, did you get it? Did you understand? And then avoiding open-ended questions. Open-ended questions are a trap a lot of times. Of saying, even just in a regular marriage or partner relationship, where do you want to go eat tonight? I mean, it's just not, it never goes well in my house at least. So giving options. Do you want to go to Outback or do you want to go to Longhorns? Do you want a sandwich? Do you want soup? And not always are they going to want one of those things, but at least it's kind of starting somewhere instead of that broad, open-ended question. And yes, no questions are great too. So E, empathizing. This goes without saying, but I do think that it's worth mentioning for all these things. Recognizing that lack of communication, that reduced initiation, or those errors are not intentional. And again, I know it's something that we all have the knowledge of this, but still taking a moment to realize, okay, they're not talking to me not because they don't care, or not because they have given up on it. It is truly a neurological phenomenon. Being aware of how those cognition changes impact communication. We talked about that with overall initiation reduction. Taking a break. So this is what I'm talking about with pausing. If you do feel that frustration rise, just kind of stepping away from it for a second and then hopefully circling back to it later. And this one I think is important. Allowing extra time for conversations. Again, I know in even just a regular day-to-day occurrence, if I am trying to have a rushed conversation with my kids or my husband, it's almost never going to go well. That's always going to be when somebody has a big issue, something comes up, and then we're all angry at each other. So trying to, especially if it's something important, and I know life doesn't always allow for this, pausing, saying, okay, I'm going to give extra time and space for this conversation because I don't want to be rushed. I don't want you to feel rushed. These are great tips. So ease the conversation process. And this one and the next slide are going to talk about setting the stage up for success. So giving specific feedback to the person with Parkinson's. So for example, if they are talking to you about where they want to go, and you heard, okay, I know you want to go somewhere, I just didn't hear where you want to go. giving that really specific feedback of, I got generally what you want to say, but I need to narrow in on this piece of it. This piece of it I didn't understand. That does tend to help both the care partner and the person with Parkinson's. Establishing the topic before you even start. Hey, I want to talk about what we're going to do next weekend. Go from there. Encouraging attempts at communication. This is kind of going back to what I was saying before too, about letting the therapist or the physician or whomever be the one to kind of give critical feedback and just encourage those attempts at communication. Try not to point out like, okay, I understood what you said, but you didn't say it loud enough, or I need you to take a deep breath. Those are all good pieces of feedback, but try not to always give that, especially if they're making an attempt to communicate. We don't want to discourage communication. And then be honest if you didn't understand what was said. Try not to ever say, oh yeah, okay. I mean, again, this has come back to bite me in my own personal relationships. If I didn't hear my husband, I'm like, yeah. And he was like, you heard nothing that I said, right? And I'm like, yeah, okay. Be honest. They want to be heard, and they want to be heard correctly. So trying to say, okay, so sorry, let's try that again. I didn't get that. Controlling the environment. So again, this is setting yourself up for success. When you are trying to have these conversations, I can't tell you how many times when I've worked in the hospital, gone into hospital rooms, and the TV is just blaring. And I'll tell the family, I'm so sorry, I can't concentrate with the TV on. And they're like, oh, no, it's fine. They can hear you above the TV. I mean, it rarely works out. So eliminating the background noise, really, even going beyond muting the TV, turning it off, putting phones completely away. You want to have, again, that eye contact. You want to be able to hear. You want to be able to see. Avoid extended conversation in noisy environments if possible. Distracting environments. There's a lot of people, a lot of visual stimulus. Again, you can't always avoid that, but just go into the conversation knowing this might not be as effective as it could be if we are just quiet and face-to-face. And then driving. I know driving does tend to feel like that's a great time for long conversations, and it might work for you and the care partner and the person with Parkinson's. But keep in mind all these things we've been talking about. You can't have a lot of those things when you're driving. You're next to each other. You can't look at each other. You're distracted by visual stimulus. You're distracted by just what's going on in the car. So definitely try it, but know, hey, this might not work out as well as it could if we're at home and face-to-face. And then age, having a plan. So determining before going into conversations, or even if you do have to go somewhere that's distracting, or you're going to a group setting or a party, if there are any compensations that work best, whether it is writing or apps, a communication board, having those backup options, or just knowing what you're going to get into, that really does help ease that process. So this is kind of accumulation of the tips for managing frustration. I've read multiple surveys about sources of frustration for care partners, and it's almost always reduced volume. I can't hear them. I can't hear what they're saying. So taking steps to improve that, whether it be through therapy, whether it is through compensations, whether it is through AAC, whatever it is, knowing going into it that, this is something that we might struggle with, and then trying to facilitate that process. Taking a pause in the conversation, trying to avoid those rushed communication changes, building your care team. And I know this is something that we all speak about a lot, but it is so important, not just family and friends, but having those therapists, having counselors, support groups, specialty physicians. I really feel like, 50% of what I do is therapy, with actually trying to improve the voice or improve cognitive communication. The other 50% of what I do is educating the patient, educating the family, being a support system for them, just validating what they're going through, listening to them, saying, yeah, absolutely, this is something that happens. It's okay. I'm here to answer your questions. I'm just here to listen to you. Education is power. It helps you to be an advocate for your family member. And it really does kind of help you. The more you know, even if it's hard to hear and hard to take, it does help you move forward with saying, okay, I can do this. I can help support if I do know more. And I feel like as a therapist, that's equally important to the actual care that I do. And then, I know we talked about this a lot today, but self-care, it's really important. You got to do it. Sleep, make sure you're getting enough sleep. That as a care partner, that's a huge, huge thing. Exercise, nutrition, continuing your hobbies, seeking counseling for yourself, and taking a break. So, I went quick. Any questions? Thank you all so very much for coming today and listening to me.
I'm an ageless grace educator, which means I'm a coach for people moving and 21 tools. Everything that we've done today, you've heard about from a physical standpoint, has to do with ageless grace. For you as a care partner, for you as a person with Parkinson, it's for all of us. Every single one activates the 5 primary functions of the brain, cognitive and physical. So, you're in your chair. This is not a demo. This is a participate. So, we're going to have to do something here. Okay. So, move your chair so you've got room. You're in a chair. I'm not. So you can see me. Okay, we're supposed to. Can you hear the music? Okay. So when you move your body, and move your body with so much freedom. Now, you can do this for yourself, for your glute joints, and for your loved one, the person you care for. Don't forget those legs, because you've got to produce the protein to create a neural pathway. Move the hips, organ joints, knees, ankles. Come on. Reach up and open your heart. So feeling the joy of movement, not perfect, improvising. Okay. Come on, let me see how you do it. I know you're sitting in a chair, but you can move your legs. And the point is, you're sitting the whole time. So you can move your legs and you're behind. Something you know how to do is standing up. You have to figure it out sitting down. So you step in your chair. You know how to do that standing up. Sitting down, your brain has to process that. Freedom. Yeah? Keep it moving. You gotta have that body worked out. Keep your fascination and fun up and frustration down. Now, that's tool number 1, juicy joints. Oh, this one is spelling B. B for body. We're going to spell with body parts. So, let's try spelling love in cursive with our hands. Cursive. L, out loud. O, B, E. All right, let's do it again. Come on. L, O, B, louder. E. See, just like big and loud. L, O, what? B, E. Now backwards. E, B, O, louder. L. Oh, you know that. Tell me again. E, B, O, L. Oh, okay. How about care? Care in black letters, vertically. Block. All caps. C, A, R, E. Come on. You have enough room for it? C, A, out loud. R, E. One more time. C, A, works. So improvising is what you're doing. I think this is a little gentle geometry. Let's try this. Everybody make a circle. You got it? Got that circle? How about a square with this hand? At the same time. Come on, press it. Come on. Square, circle. Watch your hands, not mine. Talk to the hand. Talk to the hand. Square and a circle. You know, if you do this long enough, you'll get it. Practice. No, don't give up. No frustration. It's no long way. It's not a test. Square and a circle. And I have to talk at the same time. So if you have to spell your name at the same time, that's mistake. All right, let's change it to the other side. Here's our circle. However big you want to make it. Big circle. Big circle. And a big square. Come on. You got it. This thing's a video. Square, how about square? Oh, how about a circle with your nose? Circle and a horizontal line with your arms at the same time. I've never done this before. It's not working too well, but maybe I'll get it. All right, how about a circle with your elbow? And a triangle with the other hand. Arm, a circle, and a triangle. You're getting that high up. What you doing? Remember what we did as kids? Tap your head and rub your stomach. Let's try the other side. Circle. Oh, that feels good in my shoulders. Triangle. 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 I think you got it. How about that triangle over there? All right. How about two circles? And how about giving yourself a pat on the back? Good job. So 3 tools. 3 ageless grade schools. There's 21. Thank you. And there's a website, agelessgrace.com. And there are classes and also one-on-one. And I'll be doing a seminar for caregivers very shortly. Probably 1st of December. I can't think past Thanksgiving somehow or another. So, be on the lookout for that. My website is everywhere, and I have some cards if you're interested. But go to agelessgrace.com, and you'll know how to get in touch with me, because I think I'm on the website for whatever. Yeah, Sandy Bramlett, and the classes around the country. So thank you for participating with me. I hope you got a little movement in. And there's no rules for this. You make it up. So you can do these things every day, 3 minutes a day. 3 tools a day. Every day gives the continuity for the neurological and the physical pathways. Not always the same, changing it up.
All right, let's give Sandy another round of applause.